Moment no one expected. George Strait interrupts his own show after noticing something strange in the crowd. The rain hammered against the small basement window as 25-year-old Marcus Jenkins sat hunched over his worn acoustic guitar, his fingers dancing across the strings with a precision that defied the darkness surrounding him. In the dim light of his converted bedroom, the young man's world existed in melodies and harmonies that painted pictures his eyes could no longer see. Marcus had been blind for 13 years, ever since that devastating December night when his parents' car skidded off an icy Tennessee highway. The accident that stole his sight also took away the two people who believed most in his musical dreams. But in the suffocating silence that followed those tragic months, something extraordinary emerged from the ruins of his shattered world. His fingers found the opening chords to Amarillo by Morning, and as the familiar melody filled the cramped space, Marcus felt the same electric surge that had coursed with the usual soundtrack of country classics that Tina played to keep Marcus oriented and comfortable during their trips around town. She had memorized every pothole, every stop sign, every shortcut through their neighborhood, becoming his eyes in ways that went far beyond simple navigation. Today, however, something felt different. Marcus could sense an unusual tension in his sister's posture, a slight tremor in her voice that he had learned to recognize over the years. "Tina, what's going on?" Marcus asked as they pulled into the Henderson driveway. "You've been fidgety all morning." His sister turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment before speaking. "Marcus, I did something, and I'm not sure if you're going to be angry or excited." She paused, gathering courage. "I bought us tickets to see George Strait next Saturday night." Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. George Strait, the king of country himself, was coming to Nashville, and somehow his sister had managed to get tickets to what he knew would be a completely sold-out show. But the practical side of his mind immediately kicked in, the same voice that reminded him daily about rent, grocery bills, and the reality of their modest income. "Tina, how much did those cost? You know we can't afford—" "They're VIP tickets," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "And before you start lecturing me about money, let me finish. I've been saving for 8 months, Marcus. 8 months of overtime shifts at the diner. 8 months of putting aside every tip I could spare. And I sold Mom's pearl necklace." The mention of their mother's jewelry hit Marcus like a physical blow. That necklace was one of the few precious items they had left from their parents, a tangible connection to the woman who used to sing lullabies to him every night before the accident changed everything. "Tina, you didn't have to do that," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I did," she replied firmly. "Marcus, you've spent 13 years taking care of everyone else's dreams. You tune their pianos, you teach their kids to play guitar, you fix their broken instruments. When was the last time someone invested in your dream? When was the last time someone believed in Marcus Jenkins the way you deserve?" As they sat in the car, Marcus felt tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in years threatening to surface. His sister had sacrificed something irreplaceable to give him a chance to see his idol perform, to be in the same room as the man whose music had literally saved his life during those dark months after the accident. "There's something else," Tina continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I wrote a letter to his management company 3 weeks ago. I told them about you, about your music, about everything you've overcome. I know it's a long shot, Marcus, but what if—" "What if what?" Marcus interrupted, though he already knew where her thoughts were leading. "What if this isn't just about watching a concert? What if this is about showing the world what I already know, that my brother is the most talented musician in Nashville, and the only thing standing between him and the career he deserves is one person willing to give him a chance?" Marcus reached for his sister's hand, feeling the calluses from her long hours at the diner, the same hands that had guided him through every challenge of the past 13 years. In that moment, sitting in the Henderson driveway with George Strait tickets burning a hole in Tina's purse, Marcus Jenkins made a decision that would change the trajectory of both their lives. He was going to that concert, and for the first time since the accident, he was going to believe that miracles were possible. The Henderson piano could wait another day. Some moments were too important to postpone, and Marcus had the strangest feeling that Saturday night was going to be one of those moments that divides a life into before and after. Little did he know that his instincts were about to prove more prophetic than he could have ever imagined, and that George Strait himself was about to learn the name Marcus Jenkins in a way that would shock the entire country music industry. The week leading up to the George Strait concert crawled by with the agonizing slowness of molasses in January. Marcus found himself unable to concentrate on his usual routine, his mind constantly drifting to Saturday night and the possibilities that Tina's letter might have created. Every time his phone rang, his heart jumped, hoping against hope that someone from Strait's management team might be calling. But reality has a way of tempering even the most optimistic dreams, and by Thursday afternoon, Marcus had convinced himself that Tina's letter was probably sitting in some intern's trash can in Nashville, unread and forgotten among hundreds of similar requests from hopeful fans. "You're overthinking this," Tina said as she helped Marcus select his outfit for the concert. They had decided on his best black jeans and the vintage Western shirt their grandmother had given him for Christmas 2 years ago, the one with mother-of-pearl buttons that caught the light just right. "This night is about celebrating your love for his music, Marcus. Everything else is just bonus." But even as she spoke those reassuring words, Tina couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. She had always possessed an intuitive sense about her brother's future, the same intuition that had led her to secretly record some of his basement performances and upload them to YouTube under the name Midnight Nashville. The videos had gained a modest following, 300 subscribers who appreciated Marcus's raw talent and authentic sound, but Tina had never told her brother about her covert promotional activities. Saturday morning arrived grey and drizzling, with the kind of persistent rain that seemed to seep into bones and dampen spirits. Marcus woke before dawn, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and anxiety that made breakfast impossible. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, listening to George Strait's greatest hits album for what must have been the 100th time in the past week. The chair filled the small apartment, and Marcus found himself singing along, his voice unconsciously mimicking Strait's distinctive phrasing and timing. He had studied every nuance of the man's vocal style, every subtle breath and emphasis that made George Strait the undisputed king of country music. In his mind, Marcus could picture himself on stage, guitar in hand, delivering those same songs to an audience that understood the power of authentic country storytelling. "Marcus, we need to leave in 2 hours," Tina called from her bedroom, where she was carefully applying makeup and trying to calm her own nerves. She had a surprise for her brother, a handmade sign that she had been working on all week, written in large, bold letters that would be visible from the stage if they managed to get close enough to the front of the VIP section. The drive to the arena was filled with nervous energy and the kind of siblings conversation that dances around the edges of hope without daring to voice it directly. Tina had mapped out their route to avoid construction and traffic, determined to arrive early enough to secure good positions in the VIP area. She had read every online forum and review about previous George Strait concerts, learning that he often made eye contact with fans in the front rows and occasionally acknowledged signs or special requests. "Promise me something," Marcus said as they pulled into the arena parking lot. "Promise me that no matter what happens tonight, you won't be disappointed if it's just a regular concert. I don't want you to feel like you wasted Mom's necklace if nothing magical happens." Tina reached over and squeezed her brother's hand, feeling the calluses from years of guitar playing and piano tuning. "Marcus Jenkins, magic happens around you every day. You just don't always recognize it because you're too busy making it happen for everyone else." Their first taste of reality came at the VIP entrance, where a burly security guard named Rick Thornton looked them up and down with undisguised skepticism. Marcus's white cane and dark glasses immediately caught his attention, and not in a positive way. "Hold up there," Thornton said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "These VIP tickets, where'd you get them?" Tina bristled at the implication in his tone but forced herself to remain calm. "We purchased them through the official Ticketmaster website 6 months ago," she replied, producing her phone to show the confirmation email. Thornton barely glanced at the screen before shaking his head. "Look, I don't know what kind of scam you're running here, but VIP tickets cost $800 each. You really expect me to believe that a blind kid and his sister dropped $1,600 on concert tickets?" The words hit Marcus like a slap across the face. In all his years of dealing with people's assumptions about his capabilities, he had never encountered such blatant discrimination at what should have been a celebration of music and community. He felt Tina's hand tighten on his arm, felt her entire body tense with the kind of protective anger that had gotten her suspended from high school for defending him against bullies. "Excuse me," Tina's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that Marcus recognized as the calm before the storm. "Are you seriously suggesting that my brother isn't capable of earning money or making his own decisions about how to spend it?" Thornton crossed his arms over his chest, clearly enjoying the confrontation. "I'm saying that I've been working security at these events for 15 years, and I can spot fake tickets and sob stories from a mile away. The VIP section is for real fans who can actually afford to be there." A small crowd of other concert-goers had begun to gather, some filming the interaction with their phones, others simply gawking at the unfolding drama. Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment and anger, but also with a determination that surprised him with its intensity. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fury building in his chest, "I work as a piano tuner and music instructor. I saved for 8 months to buy these tickets because George Strait's music has been the most important thing in my life since I was 12 years old. I can prove every word I'm saying, but more importantly, I don't need to prove anything to you or anyone else about my right to be here." A second security guard, an older man named James Morrison, who had been watching the confrontation with growing discomfort, approached the group. Morrison had a daughter with cerebral palsy and recognized the particular brand of ignorance that Thornton was displaying. "Rick, what's the problem here?" Morrison asked, his tone suggesting that he already suspected what the problem might be. "These two are trying to pass off fake VIP tickets," Thornton replied, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Look at them, James. You really think they belong in the VIP section?" Morrison examined Tina's phone carefully, scanning the QR codes and checking the ticket information against his security database. After a few moments, he looked up with an expression that made Thornton take a step backward. "These tickets are completely legitimate," Morrison said firmly. "Not only that, but they're some of the most expensive VIP packages we sell, front row center, with backstage tour access." He turned to Thornton with barely concealed disgust. "Maybe you should worry less about what people look like and more about doing your actual job." But Thornton wasn't finished. His pride had been wounded, and he was determined to salvage some sense of authority from the situation. "Fine. Maybe the tickets are real, but I still think it's a safety issue having a blind person in the VIP section. He could get hurt, or he might interfere with other people's enjoyment of the show." That was the moment when Tina Jenkins finally lost her temper. The months of saving, the sacrifice of their mother's necklace, the years of watching her brother face discrimination and doubt, it all exploded in a fury that would have made their late mother proud. "Safety issue?" she shouted, her voice echoing across the entrance area. "The only safety issue here is the danger of my brother having to deal with ignorant, power-hungry security guards who think they can decide who deserves to enjoy music." Her voice cracked with emotion, but she pressed on. "Do you have any idea what this night means to him? Do you have any idea what George Strait's music has meant to our family?" The crowd had grown larger, and several people were now openly filming the confrontation and murmuring their support for Marcus and Tina. A woman in an expensive cowboy hat stepped forward from the group. "I've been coming to George Strait concerts for 20 years, she said, addressing Thornton directly, "and this is the most disgraceful thing I've ever witnessed. That young man has more right to be here than half the people in that VIP section who are just there to be seen." Morrison placed a restraining hand on Thornton's arm as the security guard's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. "Rick, you need to step away from this situation right now," Morrison said quietly. "These folks are going to their seats, and you're going to find something else to do for the rest of the evening." As they finally made their way into the arena, Marcus felt emotionally drained but also strangely energized. The confrontation had reminded him of all the battles he had fought and won over the years, all the people who had underestimated him and been proven wrong. Tonight was going to be special. He could feel it in the air, in the energy of the crowd, in the way his heart was beating, in perfect rhythm with the sound check echoing from the stage. But as they approached their seats in the front row of the VIP section, Marcus had no idea that Rick Thornton was already on his radio, reporting a potential security risk to his supervisor and setting in motion a chain of events that would make the entrance confrontation seem like a minor disagreement. The real battle for Marcus's dignity and dreams was just beginning, and the stakes were about to get much higher than anyone could have imagined. The lights dimmed throughout the massive arena, and 23,000 voices erupted in a thunderous roar that Marcus felt vibrate through his entire body. He had attended concerts before, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer magnitude of energy that filled the space when George Strait's silhouette appeared on stage. The opening chords of "Here for a Good Time" sent electricity through the crowd, and Marcus found himself singing along with tears streaming down his face. Tina sat beside him, holding the sign she had spent all week creating. Written in bold black letters against white poster board, it read, "My brother Marcus is blind but knows every song by heart. He dreams of playing country music too." She had debated whether to make the sign at all, worried that it might embarrass Marcus. But watching his pure joy as George Strait's voice filled the arena, she knew she had made the right choice. For the first 3 songs, everything was perfect. Marcus sang along to every word, his voice harmonizing beautifully with Strait's distinctive baritone, while other VIP patrons around them began to notice and appreciate his obvious passion and musical knowledge. An elderly couple sitting behind them leaned forward during "All My Exes Live in Texas" to compliment Marcus on his voice, and a young woman across the aisle filmed him singing, captivated by his authentic enthusiasm. But Rick Thornton hadn't forgotten about the young man who had embarrassed him at the entrance. From his position near the stage, he watched Marcus through binoculars, looking for any excuse to intervene. When he saw Tina holding up her sign during "Give It Away," he immediately radioed his supervisor. "Charlie, this is Thornton. Remember that blind kid I reported earlier? His sister is holding up a sign trying to get attention from the artist. I think they're planning some kind of disruption." Charlie Morrison, James Morrison's cousin and head of arena security, had been briefed about the earlier incident and was already annoyed with Thornton's behavior. But arena policy was clear about signs and potential disruptions during performances, especially in the VIP section, where any commotion could be captured by professional cameras and reflect poorly on the venue. "What kind of sign?" Charlie asked through the radio. "Something about the kid wanting to play music. Looks like they're trying to get a handout or a special treatment from Strait. You know how these people operate." The phrase "these people" made Charlie's stomach turn, but he also understood the delicate balance of managing a high-profile event. Country music concerts attracted fans who sometimes became overly emotional or demanding, and maintaining order was essential for everyone's safety and enjoyment. "Keep an eye on them," Charlie responded. "If they cause any disruption, escort them to the back of the section, but don't make a scene unless absolutely necessary." Meanwhile, Marcus was lost in the magic of live music performed at the highest level. George Strait's band was flawless, each musician a master of their craft, and the sound quality in the VIP section allowed Marcus to hear every subtle detail of the performance. During "Carrying Your Love With Me," he found himself unconsciously finger-picking the guitar parts on his leg, his muscle memory translating the music into movements that other fans around him began to notice and admire. "That young man is incredibly talented," whispered Margaret Caldwell, a music industry executive who was attending the concert as a guest of the record label. She had been watching Marcus throughout the performance, impressed by his obvious musical knowledge and natural sense of rhythm. "Do you think he's a professional musician?" Her companion, veteran music producer Tom Williams, studied Marcus more carefully. "I don't know, but he's got better musical instincts than half the artists I work with. Look at how he's anticipating every chord change, every rhythm shift. That's not casual fandom. That's genuine musical understanding." As George Strait launched into "Amarillo by Morning," one of his most beloved classics, Marcus felt overwhelmed by emotion. This was the song that had saved his life 13 years ago, the melody that had pulled him out of his darkest depression and shown him that beauty could still exist in a world that had suddenly become dark and uncertain. Without thinking, he began to sing harmony, his voice strong and clear, adding a haunting counter-melody that complemented Strait's lead vocals perfectly. The effect was immediate and magical. Other fans in their section stopped their own singing to listen to Marcus, and several people began recording the moment on their phones. His harmony was so natural, so perfectly pitched and emotionally resonant, that it seemed like it had always been part of the song. Tina held up her sign higher, hoping against hope that someone in George Strait's organization might notice what was happening in the front row. But Rick Thornton saw the growing attention around Marcus as confirmation of his worst fears. The crowd was gathering, phones were recording, and in his mind, this constituted exactly the kind of disruption he had been hired to prevent. He spoke into his radio with urgency that was completely disproportionate to the actual situation. "Charlie, they're causing a scene now. The blind kid is trying to sing along with Strait, and people are crowding around filming him. This is exactly what I was worried about. We need to move them before this gets out of hand." Charlie Morrison found himself in an impossible position. He could see from his vantage point that Marcus wasn't causing any real disruption. If anything, his singing was enhancing other people's enjoyment of the concert. But Thornton was persistent, and arena policy did give security broad discretion to relocate patrons who were drawing excessive attention, even if that attention was positive. "All right," Charlie said reluctantly. "Move them to the back of the VIP section, but do it quietly and professionally. And Thornton, if you embarrass this venue or this artist with heavy-handed tactics, you'll be looking for a new job tomorrow." As Amarillo by Morning reached its emotional climax, Marcus felt a heavy hand land on his shoulder. He turned, expecting to find another fan wanting to compliment his singing, but instead encountered Rick Thornton's hostile presence. "You and your sister need to come with me," Thornton said, his voice loud enough to cut through the music and draw attention from nearby concert-goers. "You're causing a disturbance." Marcus felt his heart sink into his stomach. "What kind of disturbance? I'm just singing along with everyone else. You're drawing crowds, people are recording you instead of watching the show, and your sister's sign is blocking other people's view," Thornton replied, each word carefully chosen to sound reasonable while masking his true motivations. "Arena policy requires me to relocate you to a less disruptive location." Tina's face flushed with anger, but she forced herself to speak calmly, aware that dozens of people were now watching the interaction. "Officer, my brother isn't doing anything wrong. People are enjoying his singing because he's talented, not because he's causing problems." "Ma'am, I don't make the rules, I just enforce them," Thornton replied with false politeness. "You can either come with me voluntarily to the back of the section, or I can have you removed from the venue entirely, your choice." The confrontation was happening during a brief instrumental break in the song, and Marcus realized with horror that their situation was creating exactly the kind of scene that Thornton could use to justify his actions. Other VIP patrons were turning to stare, some supportive but others clearly annoyed by the disruption. The last thing Marcus wanted was to ruin George Strait's performance or other people's enjoyment of the concert. "It's okay, Tina," Marcus said quietly, his voice heavy with resignation. "We'll move." But Margaret Caldwell had heard enough. She stood up from her seat 2 rows back and addressed Thornton directly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in the music industry. "Officer, I'm Margaret Caldwell from Capitol Records, Nashville," she said, producing a business card that immediately caught Thornton's attention. "That young man has one of the most beautiful voices I've heard in 20 years of working in this industry. If you remove him from this section for singing too well, I guarantee you that this venue will never host another Capitol Records event." The threat landed like a thunderbolt. Capitol Records was one of the most powerful labels in country music, and their events brought millions of dollars in revenue to the arena each year. Thornton found himself caught between his personal vendetta against Marcus and the very real possibility of facing serious professional consequences. Tom Williams stood up beside Margaret, adding his own industry credentials to the confrontation. "I'm Tom Williams, and I've produced albums for half the artists on country radio," he said. "Officer, what you're witnessing isn't a disruption. It's a demonstration of rare musical talent. If you move that young man, you'll be doing a disservice not just to him but to everyone here who's getting to experience something truly special." George Strait himself had noticed the commotion in the VIP section during the instrumental break. From his position on stage, he could see security personnel gathered around 2 young people in the front row, and one of them appeared to be holding a sign. As a performer who had always prided himself on connecting with his fans, Strait was concerned about any situation that might be diminishing someone's concert experience. He made a subtle gesture to his stage manager, pointing toward the VIP section and raising his eyebrows in a silent question. The stage manager immediately radioed to security for an explanation, setting in motion a chain of communication that would bring the situation to the attention of people who actually had the authority to resolve it properly. But for now, Marcus stood in the middle of a growing confrontation. his dreams of a perfect evening shattered by the same prejudice and small-mindedness that had followed him throughout his life. As George Strait launched into the final verse of Amarillo by Morning, Marcus Jenkins had no idea that the very song that had once saved his life was about to save it again, in ways he could never have imagined. The collision between talent and opportunity was just moments away, and the entire country music world was about to witness something that would change everything. What happened next would be talked about in country music circles for decades to come, dissected and analyzed by music industry professionals, and shared millions of times across social media platforms around the world. George Strait, in 43 years of performing, had never stopped a song in the middle of a live performance, but as he reached the bridge of Amarillo by Morning, something made him pause. The commotion in the VIP section had grown impossible to ignore, but more importantly, George's trained musician's ear had picked up something extraordinary during the previous verse. Someone in the audience had been singing harmony, not just singing along, but creating sophisticated vocal arrangements that enhanced his own performance in ways that even his professional backing vocalists rarely achieved. "Hold up, boys," George said to his band, raising his hand to stop the music. The sudden silence in the arena was deafening, 23,000 people holding their breath as the King of Country scanned the VIP section with obvious concern. "Folks, I'm sorry to interrupt the song," George announced into his microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "But there seems to be some kind of situation down here in the front, and I want to make sure everyone's having a good time tonight." Rick Thornton felt every eye in the arena turn toward him, and his face burned with embarrassment and panic. This was exactly the kind of public attention that could end his career, and he knew that whatever happened next would be recorded by thousands of phones and scrutinized by arena management, the media, and potentially even law enforcement. George stepped closer to the edge of the stage, shielding his eyes against the bright stage lights to get a better look at the situation. "What's going on down there? I see security talking to some folks, and I want to make sure we're all here for the right reasons tonight." Margaret Caldwell seized the opportunity without hesitation. Standing up in her seat, she called out in a voice trained by years of boardroom presentations, "Mr. Strait, there's a young man here named Marcus who's been singing the most beautiful harmonies to your songs, and security is trying to remove him for no good reason." The arena erupted in a mixture of boos directed at security and cheers for Margaret's intervention. George Strait's expression grew serious as he processed what he was hearing. In his decades of performing, he had encountered overzealous security before, and he had zero tolerance for fans being mistreated at his concerts. "Is that right?" George asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that anyone who knew him would recognize as barely controlled anger. "Someone's being removed for singing along at a country music concert." Tom Williams stood up beside Margaret, adding his voice to the growing chorus of support. "Mr. Strait, this young man is blind. He knows every word to every one of your songs, and he's got more natural musical talent than most of the artists on country radio. He's not causing any trouble. He's making your show even better." Tina Jenkins felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. This was the moment she had dreamed about, the moment when her brother's talent would finally be recognized by someone with the power to change his life. Without thinking about consequences or protocol, she held her sign as high as she could and shouted with every ounce of strength in her voice, "Mr. Strait, my brother Marcus has been your biggest fan since he was 12 years old. He lost his sight in the same accident that killed our parents, but your music saved his life. He's a musician and songwriter, and meeting you has been his dream for 13 years. The raw emotion in Tina's voice carried clearly through the arena's acoustics, and a hush fell over the crowd as people processed the power of her words. George Strait felt something shift inside his chest, a combination of anger at the situation and profound respect for the courage it must have taken for Marcus to attend the concert, despite the obvious challenges he faced. "Security, step away from those folks right now," George commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. "And somebody tell me what this young man's name is." "Marcus," Tina shouted, tears streaming down her face. "His name is Marcus Jenkins." George Strait nodded slowly, his mind racing through possibilities that would have seemed impossible just minutes earlier. He had built his career on authenticity, on real emotions and genuine connections with his audience. Everything about this situation, the young man's obvious love for the music, his sister's fierce loyalty, the industry professionals defending him, felt like the most authentic moment he had experienced on stage in years. "Marcus Jenkins," George repeated, and his voice softened with something approaching reverence. "Marcus, I want to apologize to you for whatever treatment you've received here tonight. That's not what country music is about, and it's not what my concerts are about." Marcus felt like he was living in a dream, unable to process the reality that George Strait was speaking directly to him from the stage of a sold-out arena. His legs felt weak, and he gripped Tina's arm for support as 23,000 people focused their attention on him. "Now, Marcus," George continued, "I heard someone say you've been singing harmonies to my songs, and I've got to tell you, what I heard sounded pretty darn good from up here. Would you be willing to come up on stage and sing something with me?" The arena exploded in cheers and applause, but Marcus heard none of it. The world had narrowed to a single point of focus. George Strait was inviting him onto the stage. The stage where his hero performed, where dreams came true, where a young man from Nashville could prove that talent and passion mattered more than physical limitations or social prejudice. I can't believe this is happening," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible even to Tina. "Believe it, brother," Tina whispered back, her own voice choked with emotion. "This is your moment. This is what we've been waiting for." George gestured to his security team, the real professionals, not the arena's hired guards, and spoke directly into his microphone. "Boys, I want you to bring Marcus up here, and I want you to treat him like the honored guest he should have been from the beginning." As George's personal security team made their way through the crowd toward Marcus, Rick Thornton found himself completely isolated and humiliated. The very situation he had tried to prevent through his discrimination and small-mindedness had exploded into exactly the kind of public spectacle he had claimed to be avoiding, except now he was the villain in a story that was being recorded by thousands of witnesses. Charlie Morrison appeared at Thornton's side, his face grim with the knowledge that this incident would require extensive damage control and probably cost several people their jobs. "Rick, you need to leave the venue immediately," he said quietly. "Don't talk to anyone, don't make any statements, and report to my office first thing Monday morning." But Marcus was oblivious to the security drama playing out around him. As George Strait's team approached, he felt a combination of terror and exhilaration that defied description. Everything in his life had led to this moment. The accident that took his sight, the years of struggle and discrimination, the countless hours of practice in his basement, Tina's unwavering support and sacrifice. "Are you ready, Marcus?" asked Jake Thompson, George Strait's head of security, extending his arm to guide Marcus toward the stage. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 13 years of dreams and determination settling on his shoulders. "I've been ready my whole life," he replied, and for the first time in years, he felt like those words were completely true. As they began the walk toward the stage, Marcus heard George Strait's voice echoing through the arena one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's show Marcus Jenkins what real country music hospitality looks like." The crowd's response was thunderous, but Marcus barely heard it. His entire focus was on the impossible reality that in just a few moments, he would be standing on stage with his greatest hero, about to fulfill a dream that had sustained him through the darkest periods of his life. Behind him, Tina wiped away tears of joy and pride, knowing that whatever happened next, her brother's life would never be the same again. The boy who had lost everything in a tragic accident was about to discover that sometimes the universe has a way of giving back more than it takes away, and that true talent combined with genuine heart can overcome any obstacle that small-minded people try to place in its path. The walk from the VIP section to the stage felt like both an eternity and an instant. Marcus's legs trembled with each step, but Jake Thompson's steady guidance and encouraging words kept him moving forward. As they approached the stage stairs, Marcus could hear George Strait talking to the crowd, keeping the energy high while giving him time to make the journey. "Folks, while Marcus makes his way up here, let me tell you something about country music," George's voice resonated through the arena. "This music has always been about real people, real stories, and real heart. It's never been about what you look like or where you come from. It's about what you've got inside you, and from what I've heard tonight, Marcus Jenkins has got something very special inside him." The crowd's applause was thunderous, and Marcus felt the vibrations through the metal stairs as he climbed toward the stage. When he finally stepped onto the platform, the arena lights felt warm on his face, and he could sense the vastness of the space around him, filled with thousands of people who were now completely focused on this unprecedented moment. George Strait approached him with genuine warmth, placing a steady hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, it's an honor to meet you," he said, his voice audible both to Marcus and through the arena's sound system. "I understand you've been through some tough times, but you're here tonight, and that tells me everything I need to know about your character." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes as he tried to find words adequate for the moment. "Mr. Strait, I can't begin to tell you what this means to me. Your music has been my compass through every difficult day of the past 13 years. This is beyond any dream I've ever had." George smiled, recognizing the genuine emotion in Marcus's words. He had met thousands of fans over the decades, but something about Marcus's presence felt different, authentic in a way that cut through all the usual celebrity fan dynamics. "Marcus, I heard you singing some beautiful harmonies out there during Amarillo by Morning," George said. "Would you be willing to sing that song with me? I think these folks would love to hear what real music sounds like when it comes from the heart." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady if he spoke. One of George's guitar technicians brought out an acoustic guitar, a beautiful Martin D28 that gleamed under the stage lights. As Marcus took the instrument in his hands, he felt the familiar comfort of perfectly balanced wood and steel, the potential for music that lived within every well-crafted guitar. "Take a moment to get comfortable," George said quietly, stepping back to give Marcus space to tune the guitar and gather himself. Marcus's fingers found the strings instinctively, making subtle adjustments to the tuning, with the precision that had made him one of the most sought-after piano tuners in Nashville. The arena fell completely silent as he strummed a few exploratory chords, the rich sound of the Martin guitar filling the space with warm, resonant tones. When he began to play the opening chords of Amarillo by Morning, something magical happened. The notes seemed to hang in the air with crystalline clarity, each chord perfectly voiced and timed. George's seasoned musicians, players who had performed with the best artists in country music, exchanged glances of genuine surprise and admiration. Then, Marcus began to sing and the arena collectively held its breath. His voice was nothing like George Strait's smooth baritone, but it carried something equally powerful, a raw emotional honesty that came from years of pain transformed into beauty. He sang the opening verse with subtle phrasing that revealed deep understanding of the song's meaning, adding slight melodic variations that enhanced rather than competed with the original melody. When George joined in for the chorus, their voices blended in perfect harmony, creating something that was greater than the sum of its parts. The veteran performer found himself adjusting his own phrasing to complement Marcus's natural musical instincts, something he hadn't done with another artist in decades. But it was during the bridge that Marcus truly revealed his extraordinary talent. Without any prompting or discussion, he began singing a harmony line that George had never heard before, a soaring counter-melody that seemed to unlock hidden emotional depths in the familiar song. His voice climbed and dipped with mathematical precision but emotional spontaneity, creating moments of beauty so profound that many people in the audience began crying openly. George's steel guitar player Mickey Henderson later said it was the most naturally gifted harmony singing he had witnessed in 30 years of professional music. The bass player, Tommy Williams, added a subtle walking line that perfectly supported Marcus's improvised vocal arrangement, and the entire band found themselves rising to match the unexpected level of artistry happening on stage. When the song ended, the silence lasted for nearly 10 seconds before the arena exploded in the most sustained applause George Strait had ever received in his career. People were on their feet, screaming, crying, and applauding with an intensity that spoke to something far deeper than entertainment. They had witnessed a moment of pure musical truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," George said when the applause finally subsided, "what you just heard is why I fell in love with country music 45 years ago. That's what real talent sounds like, and that's what real heart sounds like." He turned to Marcus, his own voice thick with emotion. "Son, I've shared the stage with some of the greatest artists in country music history, and what you just did ranks among the most beautiful musical moments I've ever experienced." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the response, but George wasn't finished. "Marcus, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm completely serious. I've got 4 more shows on this tour, and I would be honored, truly honored, if you would consider being my special guest for each one of them." The crowd erupted again, but Marcus could barely process what he was hearing. George Strait, the king of country himself, was offering him the opportunity to perform at multiple sold-out arena shows. "And there's something else," George continued, gesturing toward the VIP section where Margaret Caldwell and Tom Williams were watching with obvious excitement. "I see some folks down there who work in the music industry, and I have a feeling they might want to have a conversation with you after tonight." Indeed, Margaret Caldwell was already on her phone, calling executives at Capitol Records and describing what she had just witnessed. Tom Williams was texting producers and A&R representatives, knowing that by morning, every major label in Nashville would be asking about Marcus Jenkins. But the most beautiful moment came when George called for Tina to join them on stage. As Marcus's sister climbed the stairs, her face streaked with tears of joy and pride, George addressed her directly. "Tina, I understand you made significant sacrifices to make tonight possible for your brother. I want you to know that your love and support have helped create something truly special. Country music needs more people like both of you." He then made an announcement that shocked even his own management team. "Effective immediately, Capitol Records Nashville, my label, will be offering Marcus Jenkins a recording contract. We're going to make sure his music reaches everyone who needs to hear it." The arena went wild, but for Marcus and Tina the noise faded into background as they embraced on stage, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. The little boy who had lost his sight and his parents in one terrible night had somehow found his way to the brightest spotlight in country music. 6 months later, Marcus Jenkins's debut single, "Singing in the Dark," would reach #1 on the country charts. The song, which he wrote about his journey from tragedy to triumph, would become an anthem for anyone who had ever been told their dreams were impossible. Rick Thornton was fired the next morning and never worked arena security again. The incident became a case study in disability awareness training programs across the entertainment industry. James Morrison, the security guard who had initially defended Marcus, was promoted to head of accessibility services for the arena management company. Margaret Caldwell became Marcus's manager, and together they established new industry standards for supporting artists with disabilities. George Strait and Marcus Jenkins recorded their duet album, "Two Voices, One Heart," 18 months later. It won 3 Grammy Awards and became the best-selling country album of the decade. But perhaps the most important change was in Marcus himself. The young man who had spent 13 years believing he had to prove his worth to a world that seemed determined to discount him, finally understood that his value had never been in question. His talent, his heart, and his unbreakable spirit had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to shine. As he stood on that stage in Nashville, guitar in hand, and 23,000 people cheering his name, Marcus Jenkins realized that sometimes the darkest nights really do lead to the brightest dawns. And sometimes, when you least expect it, the universe conspires to remind you that every ending is really just a new beginning in disguise. The boy who had lost everything had found something even more precious: the knowledge that dreams, no matter how impossible they seem, are always worth fighting for. And in a world that often feels divided by differences, music had once again proven its power to unite hearts and change lives in ways that defy explanation but demand celebration. Marcus Jenkins had found his voice, and the world would never be the same.